Okay, welcome everybody to our Sunday service. I'm delighted to see everybody here today. This is the very last day of February, and I was reflecting back on Groundhog Phil's prediction. I think we've got about 2 more weeks of winter, so we're getting there. Last day of February, beginning of March next time. We will begin with our prelude, which is as you can see on the screen, an improvisation by Matt Meyer. As I said, welcome to everybody. I invite if you would like to share a joy and sorrow with the group today, to put that in the chat, and we will attend to that later in the service, and I'll summarize them for us. And also would like to continue to offer the financial gifts to sustain our church and all of the work that we do in this community. You have an opportunity via the website to donate electronically, and you can also mail checks to the church. And the last day of February, our Share the Plate recipient this month is Meadville Free Clinic.
Well, good morning, everyone. The opening words actually were from Susan Hagel from last week, and I thought it would be nice to repeat them. Our beloved community could be a world in which every one of us belongs just as we are. A world of equity and affirmation, a world of fellowship and freedom, a world more livable for us all, not just within our church walls, but within our community.
And as Alex lights the chalice in our sanctuary, if you would like to join along with the chalice lighting from home, I invite you to do that as I read along. Please join me as you would wish to. Each time we light the chalice, we renew our commitment to our Unitarian Universalist faith. With the spark of a match, we make it new again, as fresh and surprising as the first day we encountered this spiritual community and realized we were home. Likewise, if you would like to join me in the unison affirmation of our covenant and mission, please do so. Our covenant is to be a loving, joyful community that nurtures spiritual growth, promotes compassion, social responsibility, and service in an atmosphere of mutual trust. Our mission is to be a faith community devoted to love and respect, reason, and justice. And we will now hear our opening hymn, which is Gather the Spirit. Many thanks to the Kitsap UU Fellowship for the video that we'll hear today.
Witness the mystery, Lord.
Thank you. The reading this morning is from a 2013 UU World article by Reverend Frederick Muir, who was at that time in Indianapolis, Maryland. The article is entitled, "The End of iChurch. To build beloved community, Unitarian Universalism needs a new narrative." And this particular article by Loewe created a great deal of conversation thereafter. This is what he says in part. For all its appeal and its influence in American culture, individualism is not sustaining. Individualism will not serve the greater good, a principle to which we Unitarian Universalists have also committed ourselves. There is little to nothing about the ideology and theology of individualism that encourages people to work and live together to create and support institutions that serve common aspirations and beloved principles. And if you could leave the reading up for a moment, just reflect on those words, everyone, and think about, how do they sound to you? Okay, thank you. The question, actually will be one question for the breakout rooms today, will be, is Frederick Muir's, is he correct in his assessment of contemporary Unitarian Universalism? And I would add here that I included a link to his article in the B&B this week, if you want to read more. So, well, good morning again, everyone. Lori, thank you. This is, I believe, your first service leader of this contemporary era. So thank you for doing that. And also to Kirsten and Amy for your help and guidance as always, and for all of you for being here today. Some of you know that this month of February for our Sundays in our small group has been about beloved community from the curriculum Soul Matters. Last Sunday, Susan Hagel shared with us some of the definitions and values of what beloved community can be. She used Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s definition to show us what such a community might look like. A society based on justice, equal opportunity, and love of one's fellow human beings. A society that promotes and practices nonviolence, mutual respect, integration, and racial equality, and economic and political equality. Now, given what these days tend to be like in this country, these words seem somewhat visionary and somewhat hard to imagine. That said, I want to take a few minutes to share how the vision of beloved community is reshaping the Unitarian Universalist world. And today I'm just going to do very much of an overview. As I mentioned earlier, there is a link in the B&B this week to that article that Reverend Muir mentioned or wrote and published then. The End of iChurch. To build beloved community, Unitarian Universalism needs a new narrative. His article was a turning point, or one of several turning points in the UUA's direction. He shared what many of us have known for some years, that Unitarian Universalism hasn't grown in the last few decades, and that trend has continued in various parts of the country, particularly in the Northeast and New England. In the West and the South, it's different, but still there's an overall decline. What Reverend Muir tells us is that our collective decline is largely due to three reasons. We are held back from beloved community by devotion to individualism, a belief that we are exceptional, and finally, by our, quote, allergy to authority and power. Now, these reasons remind me of another current theme, the wearing or not of masks. More on that shortly. Let's take a look at those three reasons a little bit more deeply. First, individualism is a core part of the American story, especially, I would add, for white people. Here tells us that Emerson's version from the 1830s of individualism is not helpful in building beloved community. He writes in the article that, and I'm going to quote here, or in the reading, there's little or nothing about the ideology or theology of individualism that encourages people to work and live together, to create and support institutions that serve common aspirations, unquote. And I keep asking myself, is that assertion he made really valid? Is it all either beloved community or beloved individualism, but not both? And I'm not certain about that. The second reason is our Unitarian Universalist feeling of exceptionalism. Now, there are many types that I've seen over the years, and here are a couple. I've heard variations of this theme in many of the congregations. In one, and I won't say where, the congregation was so fiercely humanist that they absolutely refused to celebrate Christmas Eve. Nothing was ever a sermon, it was a reflection. And there was no reason whatsoever to use the word spirituality. In that same congregation, there was one person on a membership committee when we had a large group of people wanting to become new members. And she stated, and I'll say this was after a glass of wine, that she could not imagine why anyone who was Christian would come to the church. They would be welcome, of course, but she didn't understand why they'd want to be with Unitarian Universalists. In some other congregations, the exceptionalism was economic. Anyone who was poor or didn't dress well or wasn't in a reasonably high-paying job was treated politely, but otherwise ignored. The third reason is our allergy to authority and power. When I read that phrase for the first time, I remembered some of our favorite bumper stickers. Question authority. To question is the answer, and others, and I'm sure you remember some of them. We are, after all, proud of being a creedless faith. We have, so far, no bishops or top-down central authority that tells us what priorities we should have. The right of every congregation to hire its own ministers, to have a measure of independence from the UUA, and to practice congregational polity is a core value for now. Reverend Muir tells us that the solution to those three reasons for our decline is to be and to return to covenant with one another. To be in covenant is to be accountable to one another. To be in covenant is to have the tools for people to move beyond conflict and disagreement. And I'm sure some of you will recall one tool is a relational covenant, which we agree to abide by in the case of conflict, so we can return to right relationship with others in the congregation. To be in covenant is to create the beloved community and to let go of beloved individualism. I mentioned earlier those three reasons, individualism, exceptionalism, and anti-authority, remind me of the masking debate since the pandemic began just about a year ago. I heard terms like this: individual freedom is paramount. No one can tell me to wear a mask. I'll go where I want. I'm not sick. Why should I wear a mask? Well, being in relational covenant would say otherwise. Now, there's really no time this morning to explore the changes going on in the UUA to create beloved community based on accountability and covenant. For any of us who followed it, you know that it has been a very intense ongoing process throughout the UUA in the last few years. I can say myself that what I understood as a design-it-yourself religion 25 years ago, or actually 28 years ago today when I was ordained in Massachusetts, that religion is in the middle of a radical shift. These goals of accountability and relational covenant will likely affect all of our churches in the United States over time, including this one. The goal, multicultural community with amends made for past injustices to marginalized people. The goal, a church where everyone is welcome to the table. The goal, recognizing the reality of white supremacy culture and decentering whiteness. Now, those are lofty goals, and some of them are in process already. They are and they will change the UUA in very fundamental ways over the next 5 to 10 years. Next month, we are talking about the theme from Soul Matters of commitment. And so I'll be talking a little bit more about these trends in the UUA in March. For what it's worth, I disagree with a number of the methods, if not the goals. To me, and this is just personal, the method sounds a little bit akin to a sin and salvation model. And I did not sign up in the UUA many years ago for that. Now, one last thought about beloved community. A number of people recently have asked me the question, when are we going to be able to get back together in person? And I mentioned something about that in my column in the Oracle this last week. But just imagine that not if, but when we can get back together in person. We can come to the sanctuary. We can have a meal together. We can have hikes. We can do the picnic. Imagine what it will be like to be in the same place, share hugs, take off masks, see people in person we've not seen for a year or more. Imagine that. It feels like forever at this point. But imagine it when we all get back together, whenever that will be. Would that be beloved community? At least for a moment. Imagine the joy of being able to see people that you've really not seen except over media for the last year. To me, that would be beloved community made real. So I'd like to stop here so we can converse more about Reverend Muir's assertions in the breakout room. And once again, the question that we will be addressing is simply, is he right? Is he correct in his assessment of contemporary Unitarian Universalism? And I would really enjoy hearing some of your responses over the next week or two. Thank you.
All righty, welcome back everyone. It is now time to share the joys and sorrows with our community. And I'd like to first pass to Alex to share some information that he has.
And Peggy, you may want to join me on this one, because I want to give you an update around Cynthia Burton. She's no longer in the hospital. She is up at Westbury and theoretically in hospice, but as far as I understand it right now, her body organs are more or less okay. Two of her sisters were in town yesterday. They saw Peggy and probably other people. We met yesterday late afternoon to talk about, well, when Cynthia does die, what do we do? and what are the opportunities we have for celebration of life. And basically, up until then, which is really unknown at this point, how do we take care of her and ourselves? And the one thing that her sisters did tell me is she's very, very physically uncomfortable. And that's a really major challenge for her. So the reality is, and Peggy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, she can't really go anyplace else at this point. Peggy, do you have anything? And you're muted, by the way.
No, you've summarized it pretty well, Alex. I think that physical discomfort is that Westbury isn't giving her the opportunity to dangle her legs, and her legs get numb.
Mm.
I think she has to be really mobile in order to dangle her legs, and she's not that sure of herself and not that mobile, and so she's pretty much bedfast at Westbury. So that's her discomfort, because she's never been able to do that. She's had that problem for a long time. But yeah, her vital signs were good, but her breathing, she's on 4.5 oxygen, and her oxygen saturation was 96%. So it seems to me that that's going to be the biggest issue.
So we'll be checking in with her every week. I talked to her on FaceTime video this last week, and she was a little vague about things at that point, but I'm going to stay in touch, and I'm sure Peggy and Karen and others will continue being in touch with her. So we just wanted to give you kind of an update of what's going on.
Okay, thank you both, Alex and Peggy. And Peggy shared an additional note in the chat regarding Cynthia's sisters, Becky and Barbara, who are returning home today. So a candle of caring and light for Cynthia, and hope for her sisters on their journey home to today. And I'd like to light one more virtual candle for all the joys and sorrows that are in our hearts and maybe too tender to share out loud today. Our closing words today are by Kathy A. Huff. Our time in this place may have ended, but our connection to each other and this community remains. Together, may we walk the path of justice, speak words of love, live the selfless deed, trod gently upon the earth, and fill the world with compassion. Until we meet again, blessed be. And now, if you would like to remain and join with the coffee hour breakout rooms, we will get those sorted soon and hope to see some of you there. Have a lovely week. Good to see everybody.